I think it's fair to say that Pokémon is not a series known for its innovations in gameplay and mechanics. While each generation has made tweaks around the edges and have certainly added new features, the core gameplay loop of the series has generally stayed consistent since its Game Boy debut. For some people, that is perfectly fine, as there is no reason to change a clearly winning formula given the overwhelming popularity of every new mainline Pokémon release. For others though, it shows a lack of passion and love from Game Freak and every other corporate entity that has their hands in the Pokémon money pot. Why take a risk and spend a lot of money making changes when people are clearly willing to buy iterative games? I always find myself falling somewhere in the middle. The core Pokémon game formula still has its merits almost 30 years later, but advancements in technology have also created opportunities for Game Freak to create games with more immersion and interactivity with the world, which the company has seldom taken advantage of, whether it's due to tight deadlines, not enough manpower, lack of experience with AAA game development, or all of the above. However, with the release of Pokémon Legends Arceus and the announcement of Legends ZA, I have a lot of hope that Game Freak is willing to be more experimental with the series. Today, I want to explore what makes Legends Arceus such a great game, what Legends ZA might bring to the table, and how the lessons they learn from Pokémon Legends as a series could influence and improve the traditional Pokémon games. Starting from when you first open the game, you can tell Legends Arceus is very new territory for the series. The game begins when you're isekai'd away from the safety of your house by God to complete the task of catching all the region's Pokémon. As the game progresses, its strengths become obvious, and the ways that it has innovated on series staples and traditions makes for a game that is both incredibly familiar, yet fresh. In particular, the immersion of Jubilife Village, world exploration, and the story of the game are the areas in which Legends Arceus really shines, while also being the areas the traditional main series could benefit the most from adopting. Starting with Jubilife Village, this is one of my favorite places in any Pokémon game. Unlike most Pokémon games where towns and cities are places you pass through along your journey, Jubilife serves as a home base, which lets you see it grow and change as the story progresses, allowing for world building that you don't just experience as a traveler, but contribute to as a member of the village. It's clear from the start of the game that this is not a period where Pokémon are cherished or journeys into the outside world are common. Rather, this is a town full of people taking shelter from the dangers of the outside world. Initially, your presence in the village is met with trepidation, since you did just fall out of a hole in the sky and all, and it takes time to earn the trust of the village by showing you are someone who can be relied on. By having to earn the trust of the townspeople, and seeing the town itself change, I became more attached to it in turn, and it made the highs and lows of the story hit even harder. Overall, in a series known for its iconic towns, Jubilife Village stands above them all for me by feeling like one of the most dynamic locations in any Pokémon game. By contributing to the town's growth and progress, and introducing the villagers to the benefits of having Pokémon around, it feels both like you're making an actual impact on the world, while also reflecting the themes of the game as a whole, ultimately creating a more immersive experience. It's no wonder the people of Jubilife are scared of the outside world, because for the first time in a Pokémon game, it really feels like the world around you is wild and untamed. World exploration and the gameplay mechanics that come with it are the next area this game excels at, and one which might have already influenced the main series. The biggest selling point for this game, of course, were the new ways you were able to interact with the world and the Pokémon in it. Pokémon are seen in groups in their natural habitats, and they are often territorial and aggressive, requiring the player to think of strategies beyond just battling to catch them. You're encouraged to use stealth and distractions, as they are the quickest way to catch lots of Pokémon in a short time, but the option of the traditional method of battling also exists for stronger enemies. What these new methods of world interaction introduce to the game is a sense of danger. In previous games, the level 3 Poochyena hiding in the tall grass outside of your hometown are never really a threat to you, despite what the NPCs tell you. However, here, That's not the case. Not only are there alpha Pokemon waiting to humble you if you aren't careful, but wild Pokemon can now gang up on you, forcing you to battle all of them at once. If you don't pay attention to your surroundings, you could end up in a situation that you'll be forced to flee from. Overall, the world of this game feels so much more alive and dangerous than in any previous game. Thus, the fear of Pokemon from the villagers of Jubilife feels warranted, which ties the narrative and gameplay experience together in a way that creates a more immersive and believable experience than in any other game in the series. Speaking of the narrative, that is the final area this game does well. This is still a Pokemon game though, so the story is certainly not its strongest attribute, but personally, I think it's one of the best in the series. It involves helping the rival tribes of Hisui with the noble Pokemon of the region who have been acting strangely due to the rift in the sky. While in previous games, completing gym challenges is often a checkpoint to completing the actual story, the checkpoints in this game, namely the noble Pokemon, are integral parts of both the story and the world building of the game, creating more congruence between the player's actions and the story. As the story progresses, you are made to pick a side and capture either Palkia or Dialga, depending on the clan you pick, in a series of events resembling the original story of Diamond and Pearl. Overall, the main plot of the game has a lot of that Pokemon DNA we see in most other games in the series, but it's different enough to be fresh. The post-game story, though, is what really shined for me, as it highlighted the roles of Arceus and Giratina, both of which felt a little tacked on in the original Generation 4 games. Legends Arceus expands on both, while also letting us learn more about Volo. His eventual betrayal and battle reminiscent of the iconic Cynthia Champion fight felt like the perfect ending to his arc, but luckily, it doesn't end there. In typical JRPG fashion, you get to fight God himself, ending the entire story of the game on a high note. This was clearly a Pokemon story at its core, but with a much needed coat of paint. Many of the constraints born of the Game Boy era technology and carried on through subsequent decades were finally cast aside, while also keeping the identity of Pokemon as a series intact. While I do think it's ultimately the weakest out of the three pillars we've been discussing, it does enough to be interesting while not distracting too much from the better aspects of the game. From the gameplay, setting, and story, it felt for the first time in a long time that Game Freak was not only listening to fans, but embracing change. 10 months later, they went on to release Scarlet and Violet, a game which was certainly developed in tandem with Legends Arceus, and likely took a lot of inspiration from it. While that game is a whole other can of worms we don't have time for today, I think it's safe to say that the innovations in gameplay and storytelling from Legends Arceus has already influenced the traditional mainline games, and in my opinion, for the best. That then brings us to the newest entry in the series, Pokemon Legends ZA. Being a very surprising announcement to many fans who were expecting Unova remakes, it seems to be already living up to the expectations set by its predecessor in bucking series traditions. While the Generation 5 games are highly regarded, I appreciate Game Freak for focusing on the region that never received either a third version or DLC, leaving Kalos and its lore feeling underbaked, rather than Unova, which is one of the more fleshed out regions. As of making this video, there's only one trailer out, making it too early to speculate what this game will be about, much less what kind of features it will have. We know that we will be involved in Lumio City's redevelopment plan, which itself raises many questions. Redevelopment implies that something occurred to the city beforehand. Perhaps it's related to the Great War that occurred in Kalos 3,000 years ago. We also know that it will take place entirely within the confines of Lumio City. If the city was destroyed, or if its borders are much larger than in the present day, this would still allow for the kinds of exploration we experienced in Hisui. Though, of course, it's entirely unclear if exploration will even be a focus of the game, or if it will instead highlight other aspects of the connection between humans and Pokemon. My biggest hope is that it's not just Legends Arceus but set in Kalos, but rather its own unique experience. using the building blocks that made Arceus such a great game, namely world immersion and story innovation. I don't want Pokemon Legends to become another series weighed down by its own history and the expectations of longtime fans, but one that can flourish with new ideas that can then go on to influence and improve the traditional games. If that is the route they're going down, then Pokemon Legends could be exactly what the series needs. To be clear, I love Pokemon. Despite some frustrations with the series, I've been playing these games since my hands were big enough to hold a Game Boy Advance, and I won't be stopping anytime soon. The creativity of the people at Game Freak and the Pokemon Company to have created a world that millions of people are drawn to is incredible. It's clear, though, that the developers of Pokemon are overburdened and have been stuck in the past. However, I see hope in Pokemon Legends as a series. I see a company set in its ways finally venturing out and slowly but surely trying new things and doing those things fairly well. Legends Arceus is far from a perfect game, but it was a step in the direction the series has desperately needed for years. If the Legends games can be the more experimental series that Game Freak uses to explore more creative ideas that can eventually be brought to the traditional games, then I believe Pokemon Legends can save the series. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time.